Do you remember how good games were in the mid-2000s? Let me set the scene. The year is 2005. Sony was flying high off a half-decade of dominance thanks to the best-selling console of all time and decided it was time to introduce the world to the future of gaming. Turns out, the future of gaming used the Spider-Man font and was super into awkward E3 press conferences.
Genji 2 is an action game which is based on Japanese history. So here's this giant enemy crab.
But for every weird Gran Turismo / Spider-Man concept trailer forced on us, there was the very real possibility that we were going to get next-gen versions of our favorite PS2 games, and that was super exciting. It didn't take long before Insomniac delivered, and they too were excited for the future and where that could take their flagship franchise. So, in 2007, the future of Ratchet & Clank finally released, and it was called... oh god damn it, Insomniac. Ratchet & Clank Future.
I felt that was the right way to go. Trust me, people will get it.
Despite a name that was about as subtle as a brick to the face, the new title made its intentions very clear. This was going to be Ratchet & Clank like we'd never seen them before, and that all started with Tools of Destruction. In their very first PS3 outing, Insomniac managed to deliver fans the game that we needed, but not necessarily the game that we deserved.
What?
Okay, let me explain. Right from the word go, this game is designed to blow you away. And I don't just mean it's trying to be a great looking game in the modern sense, like when people talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake or Cyberpunk. I mean, it was designed to blow you away. Being a launch window game for a brand new generation of consoles, Insomniac was determined to deliver a game for Sony that would not only showcase the power of the new hardware, but also be the killer app that would drive its sales. If this sounds familiar, then it should, because Insomniac have since shown that they have a tendency to do this sort of thing. This led to the first level of Tools of Destruction pulling no punches, and I remember it being jaw-dropping at launch. Grind rails are back with a vengeance and show off a huge city while an invasion takes place as you get bounced around throughout the level. Buildings collapse as you circle around them, bridges crumble as you cross, and a number of different types of enemies would come between you and your objective. It was, and I don't say this lightly, the absolute shit back when it launched. Cut to 2022, and this level is totally fine. Now, let me be clear. I've played games that are much older than this with far worse graphics and technology, and I don't think that that on its own makes a game any less playable by today's standards. Tools is different in that area though, because the game itself is regularly saying, "Ah! Notice me!" Everything still looks great, and while you could argue that you preferred the art style of the PS2 games more, there is no questioning that graphically, this game looks substantially more detailed than anything that they put out on the PS2. But then if you're measuring it by today's standards, then it's nothing really special. The fact that this was presented to be a showcase of how far technology has come has not aged all that gracefully. So by the time the game's done saying, look at me, you look over and... Again, it's not to say that these are bad graphics, not by a long shot, but there is an undeniable disconnect between what it achieved in 2007 compared to what it achieves now. So I'm conflicted. For every cool piece of tech in this game, there's another piece that's here just for the sake of showing off the technology, and the game suffers a little bit for it. For example, this is the first game that introduces the Groovatron, albeit as a type of grenade rather than its own gun. While this comical disco ball will make enemies boogie themselves all but to death, the work that had gone into creating unique animations for every single enemy and NPC in the game is the sort of booty work that never could have been achieved on the PlayStation 2. But then, you add in the physics-based crates scattered throughout the levels and we're right back to square one. It's a cool idea, but it makes smashing large stacks of crates feel worse than ever when one or two consistently fall out of reach of your wrench. This was developed back in a time where the more touches of reality in our games the better, and it was dead set incredible seeing that stuff in games for the first time. Today though, developers have learned where to make things more realistic or more video gamey, depending on how often actions are performed. Another new addition to the series are the dialogue options with certain characters, in particular the Smuggler, who, by the way, should sue the absolute shit out of Cad Bane for copying just his whole vibe. When dialogue choices are used effectively, they are one of my favorite inclusions in a game, giving real choice to the player, and it's a large part of the reason as to why BioWare is one of my all-time favorite studios. In this case though, there are no choices or unique options to choose from in the dialogue menus. It's simply a matter of choosing every question, hearing the answer, and seeing if anything else comes out of it. At best, this was probably a way to get more lore into the game without making you need to to read logs or need extra voice acting recorded for Ratchet. At worst though, it's a lazy way of creating the illusion of player choice without giving the player any autonomy at all. Speaking of control, we're yet to see races be reintroduced to the mainline series. However, we do see the return of spaceship missions. These are different compared to going commando, turning what was a 3D dogfight into an on-rail shooting gallery. It answers the question, what if we took the gummy ship missions from Kingdom Hearts, but made them good? And the answer is, they're way better. But I'd still rather not have them in my game.
Boom. Roasted.
It does a job of breaking up the gameplay, and they don't happen too often, but they never gave me the same levels of enjoyment as I had from exploring the worlds. And at its core, this is something the game still nails. For all the nitpicking I've just done, just like every other Ratchet & Clank game before it, the gameplay is absolutely fantastic. The weapon leveling is not only back, but it also adds to it another series first that would go on to become a mainstay for the franchise in the form of Raritanium. This is another currency like bolts that can be used to purchase additional upgrades for your weapons. Similar to mods from Deadlocked, this will give your weapons things like more ammo, make them do more damage, even have a larger explosion radius, plus many more things depending on the weapon. The great thing is that these are all permanent upgrades, which gives you a real reason to go out of your way to explore off the beaten path for Raritanium chests. And trust me, you will need some of these upgrades because some of the bosses in this game can be a bit spongy, to say the least. For really the first time in this series, I found myself burning through the ammo of just about all of my guns during some of the larger boss fights. Ultimately, I think the fact that it forces you to change your weapons during these fights is brilliant, because it flips everything we know about boss fights on their head. In a traditional boss battle, it'll be the boss that will be the one to get new attacks or change their attack patterns once they drop below a certain amount of health. While that still happens here, by needing to change your weapons, that means you're going to be the one to have to change your attacks and your attack patterns too. That means maybe going from a powerful long-range weapon to a shorter range stationary turret, or even a melee weapon, leaving you vulnerable to a new set of attacks that you previously weren't worrying about. Where this becomes a problem though is when you've run out of ammo on all of your weapons, or the arena's set up in a way where you just can't use certain types of your guns. Now the only thing more frustrating than this is having your YouTube recommendations getting messed up because you subscribe to a tiny channel that reviews games way too late. So I'm not even going to ask you to do that. What I'll ask instead though is that if this isn't the first of my videos you've seen, then hit the like button to help give me a boost. It's free and it helps me out massively. To everyone who's given me a shot and subscribed though, thank you so very much. When it comes to the story, it is definitely the most intricate story the series has tackled, focusing on a conflict between the last of the Cragmites and the last of the Lombaxes. I enjoyed the story, but it does take away one of the key elements I loved about the original games. The originals tell a story of Ratchet going from zero to hero, but even after saving two separate galaxies, almost no one really seems to know who he is. Galaxies are a big place after all. He gets small scale fame, but then he fades into obscurity, so he feels like a stranger to these new planets, just like the player. In this story though, the focus on him being the last Lombax puts him in the spotlight. It feels like every planet you go to broadcasts messages like,
"All droplets move to the Skyway. The Lombax has hijacked an air tram."
Even brand new characters will immediately identify you thanks to your pointy ears, fluffy tail, and canine teeth. While this totally comes down to personal preference, having a plot focused on Ratchet and his history tells a more interesting story, but I personally think it takes away from the feeling like you're just part of the world, a single cog in the machine, which is something that our humble mechanics should be more than familiar with. But it's thanks to this very story that Insomniac were able to start creating a more rich universe for Ratchet & Clank to exist in, leading towards what are arguably two of the best games in the franchise. This game has a mix of great ideas that push the franchise forward, but gets bogged down with the fact that it was also trying to be the showcase game for a console that's now gathering dust in people's wardrobes. So while I don't think this was exactly the Ratchet & Clank game I was hoping it would be, it was a game that was necessary for Insomniac to make to really understand what the future of Ratchet & Clank was going to be. And even a poor game by Ratchet & Clank standards is still an incredible game by normal video game standards. But hey, we're only just getting to know each other, so let's not split up just yet. You really need to know more about the best video game from this whole damn series, and I'll tell you all about it in this video here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Let's go!
I'm not gonna lie, daughter had fun on Yagi, her brain fried. My lady Papa Zanny out her